So the Master in Mathematical Finance program at the University of Toronto takes pride in always being first when financial innovation happens, especially when it has to do with technology and the new derivatives, the new products that are developing in financial markets. My name is Luis Seco. I'm the director of the program, the chair of the Center for Sustainable Development of the Phillips Institute, and it's my distinct pleasure today to welcome Miguel Angel Garcia Tamargo, who is the founder and CEO of Nature Brain, a brand new company that has been created to transform nature investments using predictive AI technology. Prior to that, he was the CEO of Carbon to Nature, a subsidiary of Iberdrola, the perhaps largest renewable energy company in the world, one of the largest. And this was a company dedicated to the carbon credit market, and he was the leader of that. Now, prior to that, he has had a very long career in Iberdrola, managing their business in the United States and lots of other activity around the world. But today, the interest for us is in his knowledge and his perspective on how artificial intelligence and sustainable finance are bringing together a whole new world of opportunities, innovation, and development. Miguel, we're all yours.
Okay, first of all, thank you all, and especially thank you, Luis, for having me today with you. Despite that I don't have any experience with mathematics, science, and I have to say that I am really very excited with all the things that are happening at the same time in this ecosystem related with sustainability, with nature capital. There are a huge amount of things happening at the same time. I think that this is the right moment and the right place for taking this as an advantage for all of us. So to me, having this time, sharing this time with you and having the opportunity to share my ideas around nature capital and carbon markets is a privilege. So thank you all. I hope that this is productive. For me, will be very productive for sure. So if you don't mind, we can start with the presentation. First of all, I would like just to introduce a little bit more about myself. My background, as I said before, is not related with science or with mathematics. I have a degree in science in politics. I am a lawyer. I am an anthropologist as well. I have two different MBAs, one in public administration and another one in land management. More than 19 years working in different roles in Iberdrola. Iberdrola, as Luis said before, is the second largest energy company in the world, the largest with difference in renewable energy. I had different director responsibilities position during my time in Iberdrola. The last one was CEO of Carbon to Nature. That I started the company from the scratch. Now is the largest carbon developer in Spain, in the top 10 in the world. After almost 3 years in Carbon to Nature now, I have started my own company in the same sector related with nature investments and carbon credits, but more in the technology side. We are developing AI technology, some unique ecosystem for investment in natural capital. As a professional statement, my mission, the way that I think that I have to create value in the sector is bridge policy, business, and technology to unlock the true potential of natural capital. And I hope that I can translate something of this relevant role of natural capital in the investment and economy in this session today. I love, as a personal sentence, since I was in the high school, is this from San Agustin, and is related with mathematics, and nature is the best teacher of truth. And I think that is completely true, and nature is teaching us every day how we should manage things. I love, and I bring another very relevant sentence that I learned when I started Carbon to Nature from Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. And nature is not a cost, it's the world's greatest source of value and innovation. So let's take the advantage of nature for creating that value. So starting with the session guidelines, this pretends to be a highly interactive session, despite that we are not in the same physical room. So feel free to raise hand, to use the chat. I would like to have, because 2 hours is sometimes too much, so let's try to do some interactive session. I will prepare some ways to working together and to share ideas. We will use Mentimeter. I am not sure if you are familiar with this tool. It's a website. You can use the website, or just take a picture in your cell phone of the QR code, and let's try to see if that works. Okay, so yeah, I think that the system is working properly. So we already have the first word: hopeful, excited. I am also very excited, so that is my word as well. Interested. Okay, I see that we have 13 people, and we are 32. So I suppose that we have people that. Okay, so the good thing is, first thing, the system is working. So we will use later the system for do more interaction between us. The second thing is, I can see words like curious, interested, hopeful, excited was one of the first words. I am really very excited with the discussion with you, and with the opportunities to have experts in maths and science in front of me to discuss about these topics. So if we move forward, because this was just a training, and the following question is more related, and I would like to use it as a starting point of discussion. So the point here is, how much of the world GDP do you estimate depends directly or indirectly on nature? How much do you think? 15, 20%, 80%? So we have the first person. Okay. Wow, so we have 5 people who has already responded. More than 80%. Wow. We are talking about real figures, real numbers coming from the World Bank and the United Nations. So every country is calculating every year the GDP of the country as assumed of the added value of the production of the country, and they have to declare the origin and the impact of the calculation, and that's why we are estimating the percentage of the GDP that is coming from nature. Here is the around 7 is so, and the next question is, how much of the world's GDP do you estimate is invested as capex on nature? I mean, Before, we talked about the percentage that is coming from nature, but how much do you think that we are investing every year daily in nature to keep nature going and working according with the relevance that nature has in the GDP? Here we have around 20%, and before we had around 70%. So we can now come back to the PowerPoint. So this is the solution to this first question. First thing, over 50%, I think that the right number is 52% of the global GDP is coming directly from nature. What it is huge. Later in the presentation, we can discuss more about numbers, but less than 1% is investment in CapEx. So in front of 50% of the GDP that is coming from the GDP, from nature, we are investing only 1% in our CapEx. Imagine that how much CapEx Apple is investing in the assets of the company or any other very large company. So something around 4-5%, sometimes 10%, but 1% is really a very, very low amount. So this is the huge opportunity that we will try to decode in the following in this presentation. Okay, so this is the agenda that I am proposing. So we are discussing a little bit more about nature capital, the connection between nature capital and carbon market. We will try to describe how the market is working, market size, trends, key drivers, pricing, dynamics, future trends. We can discuss a little bit about innovation and technology in this market, how mathematics can work in this sector. And finally, we will have time for Q&A and some reflections with an estimated of 2 hours. Okay, so let's move forward and start to discuss about nature capital. So first thing is, what is natural capital? So natural capital refers to the set of natural resources that provide goods and ecosystem services that are essential for the human survival. So natural capital is related to water, to wind, sun, soil for agricultural, that is providing food. So it is clear that without that capital, without the assets that are coming from nature, the humans, we will not be able to survive in the planet. So there is first thing, an economic dependence from nature. As we said before with the first question, nature provides 55% of the global GDP. That means 58 trillions in 2025. That is the amount that we are estimating. But if you see in the chart on the left, the evolution is really very impressive. So we had less than 30 trillion in 2000. I think that the number is 28. Today we have 58, and we are estimating going up to 75 in 2030, only in 30 years. So the nature is increasing a lot the value in the global GDP, but with an insufficient investment, because as you can see in the line of the chart, the evolution is really very bad. We had around we had a number around 7% in 2000, and that number is really decreasing very, very fast. So now we have only 1% of the global capex is allocated to nature, and we are counting here not only private sector, we are counting also public sector, because the majority of the investment in nature is coming from the public sector, governments and things like that. The calculation, according with the World Economic Forum and according with PricewaterhouseCoopers, the reports that we are using for this analysis, we have actually today a gap of $400 billion in 2030 to support the needs, the basic needs of nature to keep as is today. So there is a huge gap between the value of what nature is apporting to the global GDP and the investment in capex. So how we can value the natural capital? So, and what is? And let me use an example that at least for me was very clear. Natural capital is like a savings account in a bank. Okay, so you have money in a saving account and you are receiving returns, but you only receive returns if you don't overdraw the account. So this is exactly what it is happening with nature right now. So we are receiving the returns from nature, we are receiving wind, we are receiving sun, we are producing renewable energy, we are producing food, we are producing beverage from water, a lot of different goods and key things that we need to survive in the planet. But we are forgetting that if we overdraw the capital, that we are stopping to receive the returns of that capital. So how we can value nature? So first thing, we need to identify the natural asset. We need to identify if we are valuing a forest or we are valuing a wetland or a mangrove or a river, whatever. We need to describe the services that nature is providing. We need to quantify the flows of those services, carbon capture, water. We need to monetize these flows, sum up the value, and calculating with a discount. This is a very simple calculation for maths finance, and you are attending a master in maths finance, so I'm sure that you can understand the maths behind the calculation. So that is how we can calculate the value of nature, and why calculating the value of nature is relevant, is important, because once valued nature, these assets can be factored and we can apply investment decisions over nature using the same methodologies that we are using for any other economic sector. So the very relevant starting point of the discussion today is exactly this. The true power of valuing nature capital is when we apply financial mathematics through rigorous quantitative models, and we can transform ecological benefits into assets and applying innovative financial products and any other methodology. On the right of the slide, you can see a chart describing the 4 different ways of calculating the value on nature capital, but we are not going so deep today on that. So we have another exercise in Mentimeter. What we wanted to do was working with you together in just as an example, because this was a very hot topic in the last 5 years in the United Nations, when in the COP, in the Conference for Climate, trying to apply this way of valuating nature capital with the Amazon value. Okay, so this is an example with the different services that the Amazon River is providing with carbon sequestration, water regulation, biodiversity, pollination, and other cultural ecosystem services. The total amount of those services is 317 billion a year, and applying a 3% discount rate, we can conclude that the value of the Amazon today is 10.6 trillion, what represents 9.3% of the global GDP in 2025. Value that is not counting in reality in the GDP of the countries. So that's why the most of the countries in Africa or Brazil, Peru, Colombia, there are a lot of countries that are working and they are pushing to United Nations to see how we can agree together on a way of doing evaluation of the nature capital, because I am not sure, and I would like to know your opinion about this. Later we can have a discussion around this, but I am not sure if the value of the Amazon is 10.6 trillion or not. But what it is clear is the Amazon River has a value. And today we are not showing that value in the GDP of Brazil or the GDP of the countries that are investing money, countries that should invest money on Amazon to keep the capital around the river working properly. So what it is clear is the nature has a very relevant point in the GDP. The connection between nature, capital, and carbon markets is key, because carbon markets are part of the solution to resolve this gap between the lack of investment we have in nature. Part of the carbon markets are nature-based solutions that can generate carbon credits while restoring ecosystems with a double benefit: climate mitigation plus biodiversity conservation. Carbon markets are giving us investment opportunities with the pricing that we are making with the developing of carbon credits. We can mobilize 700 billion annually that we can use to invest in nature. So carbon markets are giving us funds, are giving us resources to invest in nature capital out of the public sector, working in the private sector as another finance market. Every $1 invested in forest restoration, and this is just an example, generates between 7 and 30 in economic direct benefits in the first sector. So forests and carbon sinks have a potential value of more than 100 trillion US dollars. And in the COP of Dubai 2023, I was there as an advisor of the West African Alliance. There was a huge discussion about the future of nature capital. The representative of United States, I don't remember now the name, I'm sorry, I was a former Democratic vice president, say that in according with the estimation of United States, in 2040, nature investments will be the largest finance sector in the world, higher than the stock market or higher than any other investment cluster. So the conclusion of this first part of the session is the global economy depends today 55% on nature that generate value, and we're investing only 1% of our capital protecting that asset. So this paradox represents both the greatest economic risk in this century, but also, in my opinion, the greatest investment opportunity working with climate solutions and carbon markets. And this is what we are to try to decode in this session. Okay. So starting now with carbon markets, this is a very controversial point, and to be honest, I am not too very fan of the climate change and all of the political discussion around this concept. I prefer to justify the investment in nature with the importance of nature in the GDP and the rest of the things, but it is true that in the origin of the carbon market, the discussion was the climate action. Okay, so I suppose that you all already know that in the last century, the temperature of the Earth of the planet is increasing a lot. So carbon, we need, or the world needed to discuss a mechanism to try to stop the increasing of the temperature of the planet. This was the pathway since the Paris Agreement, when the carbon market started. And the first point was the United Nations Framework Conference for Climate Change, the UNFCCC. That was in 1992. In 1995, we have the first COP. A COP is the international conference where every country goes to discuss and to make agreements to fight against climate change. The first COP was in Berlin in 1995. As a result of the discussions, we had Kyoto Protocol, and with Kyoto Protocol started the first asset in climate change, the CDM, that was fully operational in 2005. 5 years later, the first carbon credits, fully operational and regulated by United Nations, started to work in the market with very highly prices. And there are a lot of documentation, information about the market of the carbon credits on that time. It is true that the model didn't work properly because the demand was high, but the offer was really very low. So, but those years were really very interesting to try to learn lessons for improve the model in the future. The relevant, or the most relevant piece, was the Paris Agreement in 2015. The Paris Agreement was subscribed at 146 countries. Today is around 180 countries. So we can almost say that everyone in every country in United Nations has signed today the Paris Agreement. And the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement created the carbon market as we know today. And this is what we are trying to explain in the following time, this session. You can see that how the chart is describing that after the Paris Agreement, the volume in the market side increased a lot. So the private sector started to create all the different mechanisms to work in the market. In 2020 we had the Paris Agreement fully operational with relevant size on the market. We have some difficulties during the market since 2020 until today. 2025 will be a really, really very relevant year because in the COP in November, in almost 6 weeks, in Belém, in Brazil, the countries will close finally the body of the Article 6. So we will have the full Article 6 ready, and with that we will have operational the carbon market. And that is why everyone is talking about the recovery era and the explosion of the size of the market of carbon credit. Okay. Now we are trying to explain a little bit how this Article 6 works and how the carbon credit market work. So Article 6 is divided in two, Article 6.2 and 6.4. Both are sharing the same principles. We are talking about an international carbon market. We are talking about a standardization, integrity improvement. Is a cross-border finance model. Is a global market over the countries, and without double counting. So what we are using in one specific place has not to be considered in other part of the market. With these principles, Article 6 created first with 6.2 the bilateral agreements is a decentralized market. The unit of the markets is ITMO. One ITMO is an international transfer mitigation outcome. It's a bilateral agreement country to country with a direct agreement, and is needed a corresponding adjustment to avoid the double counting. So imagine that, and this is a real case, Singapore is purchasing ITMOs to Peru. So with that, Singapore is reducing the carbon footprint of the country. Peru is increasing the carbon footprint of the country, but because Peru has a very positive balance due to the activation of the nature in Peru, Peru has that superávit, has that inventory of ITMOs that can be sold to other countries like Singapore that needs to cover the negative balance of carbon footprint with these ITMOs. Okay? Again, public market, bilateral, and with ITMOs. So this is not the voluntary carbon market that we are talking about later. 6.4 is the centralized. This is a central United Nations market with a voluntary carbon market, the VCM, that is the successor to the CDM that was created in Kyoto. The carbon credit is issued by an international registry with standards and methodologies that are working under the supervision of the United Nations with the ECVCM, that is the agency dependent to the United Nations, that is the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Market. It's a global market access, and it's a market that can be used by private sector and by public sector. Okay, so with this, we have this map regarding the 6.2, and I remind you, this is the part of the market that is working on bilateral deals between countries. So we have countries who has already closed bilateral deals, like, and I'm sorry, I am colorblind, but I'm sure that you can, I don't know if it's orange or green, but we have Peru, Singapore, Ghana, Switzerland, countries that already closed real deals according with 6.2 agreement. And we have another countries with active participation. That means that they have not finished yet any deal, but they are analyzing the market and they are in different due diligence process for purchasing ITMOs, for purchasing carbon credits from 6.2. And other countries like Canada, European Union, Australia, who are still working on the regulation for participating in this 6.2. And this is a huge opportunity for the private sector for working together with these governments, because the governments will need advising, will need consultancy work, will need tools for closing those agreements. We have another countries on an emerging participation, and finally countries like Brazil, Colombia, or Mexico that are starting the draft of the regulation of the 6.2 framework. So with this, we have two different markets talking about carbon credits. We have a compliance market and we have a voluntary market. In the compliance market, main driver is regulatory. We have a governance by the authority who is controlling the market, normally the government, for example, in Spain, the government of Spain, different project types, and later we will discuss a little bit more about the different types of projects. Credits are allocated and a specific registration that is managed by the government. The market size is very much larger than the voluntary market. Today, closing 2024, 17% of the total emissions in the world were covered already by the compliance markets. Perhaps the most popular or the more mature compliance market is Australia, but we have also California State, we have Ontario State, we have Colombia, Mexico, we have the ETS in the European Union. So different cases. So the use of the credits is it's only for compliance with legal obligations. Sectors like power, industry, airlines, by law, need to purchase emission rights or purchase carbon credits to reduce the footprint. And on the other hand, we have the voluntary market. The main driver is private initiative. So it's a governance by independent agency that are controlled by the Integrity Council of Voluntary Carbon Markets and the United Nations Framework Conference for Climate Change. Standards like Verra, Gulf Standard, and we will discuss a little bit more about that later. So the type of projects is very open, is wide range. We have nature-based solutions, technical-based solutions, removal, avoidance, and later we will explain a little bit more about the type of the projects. Credit used upon verification, and the certification entities like Verra, Gulf Standard are certifying the quality of the credit and are the entity who is selling the asset. The market size is very much smaller than the compliance market, and in 2024 we closed 4 billion value, with an estimation of increasing up to 24 billion in 2030, and we will see more information about this later in the presentation. The buyer profile mostly are corporates or individuals or non-governmental organizations that needs to meet goals or meet plans of the decarbonization. So the use of the credits are for offsetting residual carbon footprint of the companies and meeting pledged emissions in the non-financial statements of the company. So, and this is the map, again, the world where we have compliance market, where we have voluntary carbon market, or where we have both, okay? So again, here we have countries like Canada, where we have both, Australia, Spain, United Kingdom, Colombia, China, where we have two different markets, the compliance market and the voluntary market. We have another group of countries, mainly only Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Thailand, who has only voluntary market. And we have other countries like Mexico or Argentina or the European Union, where we have only a compliance market. I mean, European Union, with the exception of France and Spain, where we have also a voluntary market. South Africa is also a country where we have both. Okay, so as you can see here, there are a lot of countries who have already started to develop the regulation about carbon credits. Okay, so now I'm trying to do some kind of recap. So nature capital, the gap between the needs and the capex, how we can work with that. At the same time, we need to fight against climate change. So Paris Agreement, we created this carbon market with the goal of giving funds or providing funds to the private sector to be able to invest in nature using carbon credits. But how this market works, okay? So the first point, maybe the most relevant point, is the definition of a carbon credit, okay? So a carbon credit is the unit of the market. One carbon credit represents the avoidance or the removal of 1 ton of CO2 equivalent from the atmosphere. We are talking about CO2 equivalent because there are more than one gas. There are 7 different gases that are against the atmosphere. So, but we need to use one equivalent between methane and the rest of the gases to CO2 for working in the market. And the unit is 1 verified carbon credit, VCD, and equivalents are 1 ton of CO2 removed or avoidance from the atmosphere. Okay, so that is the unit of the market, 1 carbon credit. The generation of these credits are created through 35 projects. Each project quantifies the number of emissions avoided or removed. There is a certification. There is an entity, a third-party standard, who is verifying the project emissions and the reductions of the project, and also is issuing the credits according with that methodology. So the standard and the certification are a key part of the market, are independent agencies managed by the Integrity Council of Voluntary Carbon Markets that depends on the United Nations. The transaction of the credits are held in electronic registers and can be traded on voluntary or compliance markets. The legal nature of the carbon credit is finance asset, like asset in the stock market, or like share of a company, or like any other finance asset that you can find in a finance market. And the last point is the retirement. When credits are used to offset emissions, they are retired from the registration body to be sure that the carbon credit is not used again. So with that, we're avoiding the double counting. Okay. This is how the chain value of a carbon credit is working and how is the process of generating a carbon credit. Okay. So we have a first phase of origination. And in the phase of origination, we have landowners, communities, originators, who are companies who are analyzing the nature and analyzing opportunities of investing and creating a project, a carbon project. This is the phase of origination. The following phase is the development phase, where a developer, who is a company who is investing money, is putting capex in the carbon credit project to be developed and to generate carbon credits, this developer is generating a PDD, is defining a program, is working on the rest of the pieces of, imagine like any other project, like a renewable project. And that project, that PDD, that work is registered in the registration phase by a carbon standard. Okay, so the carbon standard is receiving the PDD, the project development document, is analyzing that everything is meeting the methodologies, is meeting the standards, is meeting with the requirements of a project to be registered. And in that moment, once the project has been registered, the project is creating carbon credits. And that is why in the chart you can see the first credit registered. You have registered credits, still not verified and not issuance, but you have that credits and you can work in the market with offtake agreement, with and with other different business around this. Once you have the project already registered, the developer working together with the implementer, both together are developing the project. Imagine that we are talking about a reforestation project. So this is the moment where the works, the physical works of replanting and doing the activity on site is done. Once the project or the development is finished, the implementation finished, we need to verify with another different company, another third party, the verificator. The verificator is a third company that is coming to the project, is verifying that everything has been done according with the PDD that was registered and approved by the certification company. So the verificator is signing off the project, and in that moment, the verificator is sending the report to the carbon standard, and the carbon standard is issuing the carbon credits. That's why you can see in the chart issuance phase with the carbon standard, and the carbon standard is sending the carbon credits to the different stakeholders of the project: developer, originator, communities, landowner, depending of the type of project and depending on the agreements between the different parties involved. With those credits, as any other asset, you can go to the market. Usually, these companies work with traders, with companies who are specialized on selling carbon credits in the market. So once the trading has been completed, you are selling the carbon credits and you are going again to the certificator to do the retirement of the credit. And the final user, the company or the entity who has purchased the carbon credit, is retiring the carbon credit from the registration, and then he can compensate, he can reduce the carbon footprint accordingly. Okay, so this is how the value chain of a project of carbon credit is working. Okay, it's complex, but it's similar than a renewable project or any other complex project in the sector. Okay. Moving forward with the different types of projects. Okay. We have two different way of do the category of the carbon credit project according with the origin of the solution. We have technology-based solution or nature-based solution. Okay, and according with if we are doing sequestration of carbon from the atmosphere, or we are doing avoidance of more carbon to the atmosphere, we have removal projects or we have avoidance projects. So you can see in the screen the matrix. So combining this matrix, we have nature-based solution for removals, and we have reforestation, afforestation, improved forestry management, mangrove restoration, peatland, wetland protection, and agricultural land management, and sustainable soil management. Technology for removals, we have direct air capture, DACs, we have biochar, and we have BECCS, very popular. If we are going to the avoidance projects in the size of nature, we have REDD+, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, conservation forestry management, and sustainable agriculture. And in the technology side, we have renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro, methane capture and destruction, and industrial energy efficiency. Perhaps this is the area where you can find the most amount of credits right now in the market. It is very relevant that the price and the quality of the project works with concepts that later we will discuss about additionality, permanent results, social co-benefits. I mean, the impact that the project is generating more than carbon credits. Okay, and using that criteria, you have less quality in the left side of the chart. Technology has less quality than nature because technology doesn't have co-benefits. And same discussion between avoidance and removals. Avoidance has a lack of permanent results because you can working against deforestation this year, but if you stop what you are doing next year, deforestation is coming back again. So that's why avoidance is working with very much less quality than removals. And in fact, in the future, there is already some regulation, for example, in Europe or in Australia, where avoidance projects will not be allowed anymore for compensating carbon credits, just to work against this lack of permanence in the future. So the reality is that the future of the carbon market is going in the top right of the matrix. I mean, nature-based solutions for removals. And most of them, reforestation, afforestation, and improved forestry management. Those are the projects where you will find more quality. And in addition to that, coming back to our initial argument around nature capital, these are the type of projects that are working in favor of nature capital, because investing in reforestation, you are investing in nature in addition to generating carbon credits. Okay. So before we talked a little bit about the importance of standards. So standards are key part of the voluntary carbon market. So there are protocols and criteria for quantifying, verifying, and issuing carbon credits. You cannot have carbon credit without a standard who is approving your project and who is issuing the carbon credits. Okay? The governance of the carbon standards are coming directly from United Nations through a independent agency, the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Market. The most relevant standards today are Verra, Gold Standard, Climate Action Reserve, American Carbon Registry, and we have another new, Plan Vivo, R3, CCB, who are coming. In the following slide, I will show you more detailed information about the different standards. The process of the registration is you have to make the decisions around methodology and standard, because you can find that there is some methodologies that are not working with every standard. So once you have decided the methodology of the carbon project you are using, the second step is deciding with which standard you are working with. Once you have decided that, you have the project validation, you have to prepare your PDD, you have to approve your PDD, you have to apply with that PDD to the registration of the project. You have a verification. The verification, as I said before, is being done by an independent third company, the verificator. And once the project has been verified, the certification company is issuing the credits. Okay. Why do standards matter? Okay, the environment, they are reviewing that the project is additional, has permanence, they are approving or they are analyzing all the risk management of the project. So they are proving that there is no double accounting. They are enable credits to be recognized by a third parties. So again, certification standards are really a key part of the carbon market. Here is a summary of the different standards, focus, approach. The most relevant in terms of the market, because they are covering right now 70% almost of the market, is Verra. Verra is working in almost every type of project, technology-based solutions, nature-based solutions, energy, almost everything, and the approach of Verra is global. They are working everywhere. Second one, Gold Standard, very relevant in Europe and very, very relevant in terms of forest, reforestation, afforestation, wetlands. They are working mostly in nature-based solutions, but they have also methodologies for energy. Climate Action Reserve is the most popular in North America, United States, Canada, Mexico. They are focused only in forestry and improve forestry management. But again, they are really very popular. The majority of the market, for example, in the compliance market of California, you will find a lot of CAR, Climate Action Reserve, the technical name is CAR, credits, very, very popular. And in a similar situation, we have American Carbon Registry. This certification is working only in US. They have a little bit open other countries, but they are working mostly in US and only mainly in forestry and in agricultural. Plan Vivo, who is, despite they have a global focus, they are working most in the global south. Plan Vivo is focused on agroforestry and in projects developed by local communities. And the last one that I wanted to bring to the session is R3, because R3 is the new methodology that United Nations is trying to create for the REDD+, because these type of projects have suffered a lot in the last years with reputational criticism, with the pricing reducing to $1 per credit when the price 2 years ago was 20. So R3 is coming to renew all the methodology and to try to build again all the things around the new methodology for avoiding the problems that previous REDD+ with Verra had. So here is the explanation on a very short time about how the carbon credit market works. And here I have before going to the next point is who and why are purchasing carbon credits. I wanted to share this video with you. I wanted to share with you this video from Apple, because it is really very interesting way of explaining why some companies like Microsoft, Apple, or any other, Iberdrola, the company where we worked for 19 years, are investing or are moving forward in this carbon market credit. So here you have some information or a picture about the different companies and the motivation of buyer carbon credits. So first of all, we have corporates like Microsoft, Google, that have already agreed zero pledge and zero goals in the non-financial statements that are public and shared with investors. We have governments. We discussed it before a little bit about how governments are also purchasing credits in a bilateral basis to reduce the carbon footprint. Motivation, regulatory compliance. Some countries, as we said before, they have that regulation. Reputation, voluntary climate leadership, supply chain decarbonization. The trends is very, very rapid growth in tech, finance, retail sector. Aviation has a specific obligation by 2028. This is at the same time, there is an increasing scrutiny on credit quality and reporting integrity, and more supply chain focus. Okay, here the good thing is this information is public, so the large companies, at the same time that they are reporting finance statements, they are reporting non-finance statements and the climate pledge. Here you have the evolution of the large companies around the world that already committed goals in carbon footprint reduction. Today, we are closing 2025 with around 1,000 companies. We are estimating, 10,000 companies, and we are estimating that we will have more than 20,000 by 2030. Analyzing the needs of carbon credits of those companies, we are closing 2025 with a demand of carbon credits of 400 million. That will be in 2030 1,600, 4 times the demand of carbon credits that we have today. Okay, if we translate these numbers in money, in value, we have that we have closed 2024 with a market size of $4 billion, and we have a projection of a market size in 2030 of $24 billion. That means 4.5 times the size of the market we have in 2025. So this means average increase of 35% annually for the following 5 years, having North America as the largest market in 2025 and Asia Pacific as the fastest growing market in the world. So this means I'm trying to compare the size of the carbon market with other markets. We have, or we can conclude today using the closing of 2024, 4 billion, over 70 national and regional carbon pricing instruments in operation globally. So significant year-over-year growth, driving by the increasing of zero pledge companies and new regulations. We expect to have a market in 2030 of $24 billion. But trying to compare the size of that market with other relevant markets, today we can say that the carbon credit market is similar than the soccer global market, according with the calculations of FIFA. FIFA, the International Federation of Football Association, is saying that the size of the soccer market globally is $4 billion. But in 2030, the size of the carbon market will be similar to drones global market, and everybody's talking about drones, and you can find companies launching and starting business in that sector almost every day. And another very impressive comparison is the data integration global market. You know that every tech large company like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, they are investing a lot of money in the data integration global market, and the size of that market will be similar, according with the projections that we are managing, to the size of the carbon credit market in 2030. In terms of pricing, what it is another very relevant point and related to mathematical finance. So here in this chart, you have the evolution of the pricing of the carbon credits up to date and the future projection according with 3 different scenarios. We have a pessimistic scenario, assuming that the market is not growing, just with inflation adjustments, the structural problems that we are facing today, or the international geopolitical situation is not improving, so we are keeping the same tendency of the market. The average price of the carbon credit will be around $7.5 in 2030, with a annual average growth of 1.4%. If we are working with a conservative scenario, We are keeping the gradual quality improvements. We are considering that we are facing the problems that the market is facing today, and we are trusting on the corporate adoption and the different regulatory support from different countries. And in this conservative scenario, the pricing evolution will be that the average price of a carbon credit in 2030 will be $22 with an annual average growth of 25.7%, what it is really very impressive. But if we go with what we wanted to call realistic scenario, realistic is meaning really the normal evolution of the market that we are trusting with a strong commitment from corporates, with the full regulatory market in place, with the full regulation that countries like Brazil, Panama, Mexico are working on, with the fully regulation coming from the European Union that today they are working on. With all of that already put in place on time, the estimation is having an average carbon credit price of $50 in 2030, what means an increase of average annual increase of 48.2%. Okay, what it is really very impressive, and it is very, very difficult to find another similar finance market with these projections in terms of growth of the size, but also in terms of the pricing and the market dynamics. And I wanted also to make some kind of reflection about what it is behind the value of a carbon credit, not only a price, because an average value of a carbon credit today, talking about high quality carbon credit project, we are talking around $20 per credit. So we can conclude that the value of 1 ton of CO2 today is $20. But let's compare that value with other goods, basic goods like gasoline, for example. 1 ton of gas today, using the price of Canada today, of Ontario, we are talking about $1,120. So it is really an incredible gap between the value of 1 ton of CO2 and 1 ton of gasoline. But if we compare that with water, for example, the jump is incredible, because today the market value of 1 ton of natural water bottle just put in your house is around $2 million. So if you compare the value of 1 ton of CO2 with 1 ton of gas or 1 ton of water, and you try to analyze how important is for the future of the world, of the economy, of the GDP, of the global GDP, these different goods, we can conclude that there is a opportunity of catch up in the value of the carbon credit. For sure, the value of carbon credit will never be 2 million for a ton, but it's clear that we need to see that increase in the value of a ton of CO2. Here we have some pricing and market dynamics. Very relevant to understand how the pricing is working, because it's a very transparent market in terms of the projects, in terms of the methodologies, in terms of the certification bodies, but it's not clear sometimes how the pricing is building, because at the end of the day, the deal is being closed directly by the buyer and a seller, and they can agree openly on the price. So we have a different price depending on the project type. As we said before, removals are more expensive than avoidance and are more expensive than renewable. And in general, nature-based solutions are more expensive than technology-based solutions. Certification standard, higher integrity standards, global standards like Verra Gold Standard bring you higher price than other local methodologies or local standards. Depending on the co-benefits, the value and the price of the credit is also increasing. So social benefits increase the buyer willingness to pay more. That's why forest reforestation projects related with community support, with co-benefits to the communities, will bring you higher price. Supply and demand, like any other free market, and in regions or in type of projects where the supply is low, the prices are very much higher. That's why, for example, projects of blue carbon in mangroves or wetlands in the Caribbean region are more expensive than other type of projects. Also, the buyer profile is increasing the requirements in terms of compliance, and they are willing to pay more. Companies like Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, they are very concerned about the quality of the project and the reputational behind the development of the project, and that's why they are willing to pay more, and they are purchasing projects with higher price. And the last point that is working on how the price is being managed is the type of contract. Carbon market is using similar type of contracts than renewable energy. So you can find forward carbon credit purchasing, CPAs, carbon purchasing agreement, offtake agreements, offtake spot agreements, and purchasing time to time. So similar way that the renewable energy is working, carbon credit market is working as well. Here I included dashboard of the from World Bank that is providing you information about offer, supply, and also pricing. It's public, and you can use the link to go there and to see the different markets, compliance market in Canada, voluntary market, European, ETS. It's very interesting, and you can learn a lot, and you can download data and analyze information. In terms of having some time for Q&A, I will move forward. I would like to just spend a few minutes more just putting on the table for your awareness future trends in this market, because as I said at the beginning of the session, it's clear that we have in front of us a huge opportunity for investment and for a new sector growing and creating value. Here you have some different areas: digital measurement, reporting and verification, using automated emissions tracking, and companies who are already working on this, like Pachama, Upstream Tech, Space Intelligence. In the area of transparency and integrity, providing public and registries and quality rating platforms, supply chain integration. Here we have a very nice work from Salesforce Salesforce has already launched a net zero cloud for developers and for large corporate companies who needs specific software for managing purchasing. So tokenization, blockchain, carbon credits as a tradable digital assets, as this is happening everywhere in any other finance market. Blockchain technology is coming and is creating finance assets, and this is also coming for sure to the carbon credit market. Smart contracts and trading in United States, we already have some marketplaces with smart contracts and with trading, with future assets finance. Singapore is starting a new finance market. South Korea is also working on a specific trading and secondary market for carbon credits. And the last point is new marketplaces, APIs for purchasing on a easiest way carbon credits. So the opportunities around the carbon market and around nature capital is huge for new business and for new companies. Here is a planification of the changing technologies that are already working today and will come into the sector, starting with the artificial intelligence and the DMRV, the reporting and verification of the projects. This year we will have already platforms and companies who are launching tools. One of them is NatureBrain, the company that I founded. In 2 years, no more, we will have blockchain coming to the registry integration. Verra has already announced the blockchain technology, gold standard. The standards are investing money on moving forward on that direction. Smart contracts for 2030, and carbon trade, and the having dynamic customized credits like we have today with Amazon, Netflix in 2035. The idea of having everyone who can purchase on real-time carbon credits using cell phone to reduce the individual carbon footprint. Or imagine that you are using Netflix and you are starting a film, or you are at the same time that you are starting a film, you can purchase carbon credits to be sure that you are mitigating the impact on nature of the use of this platform that you are doing. That is like the new future of the carbon credits, but again, we already have companies like are working on that, so that is coming in the following years for sure. And here perhaps is the most relevant outcome for you as my audience today is the opportunities on math finance. So currently we have relevant mathematical applications, and you have that chart where you can see almost working in risk management, portfolio management, in business intelligence. There are different applications that are currently working. Stochastic modeling, portfolio optimization, machine learning, NatureBrain. We are working in NatureBrain with machine learning for developing PDDs, derivatives pricing, and World Bank is already working on some different ways to do calculations around the future pricing on carbon credits. But other future application of maths finance, the most relevant in my opinion is quantum finance. using computational advantage, crystal ball, Monte Carlo methodologies, game theory for helping governments and developers to make decisions around investment, climate risk integration, because maths and nature are clearly linked. You can explain nature using maths, and because you can use maths for explaining nature, for sure you will be able to use maths for helping creating the right information for making decisions around nature. So I see huge opportunity for maths and finance and mathematical finance in the future in this sector. Talking about career impact and opportunities. So the carbon market is underdeveloped under a mathematical point of view in comparison with other sectors like bank, finance, private equity. There is a huge gap that we need to cover. So for sure, the sector will need people, we need talent on mathematical finance to join and to improve the different process in the sector. So carbon markets will offer or could offer graduates to opportunities in developing careers here. Again, I would like to share the key statistic that 50 billion market in 2030 with a 48.2% of annual growth. That means that for sure we will have in front of us 5 years with a very high potential in this sector. Just for finishing the presentation, I would like to review the 10 must that, in my opinion, any nature-based solution project should have. Additionality, a strong, transparent MRV, measurement, reporting, and verification. Permanence, low risk on reversal, the positive impact that we are making on nature. No double counting or resale. A very recognized standard like Verra, Gold Standard, who is certifying the credit. Co-benefits with local communities, audited and proven. Very relevant positive impact also on biodiversity. Documentation of public and independently audited. A platform that is reputable and transparent, where the purchaser or the user of the final user of the carbon credit can see the positive impact of the project. And the last slide with a summary of the 6 takeaways that I would like you take of this 1 hour and a half that you shared with us today. First one is natural capital is foundational for sustainable economies, severely underinvested globally. This lack of investment represents a huge opportunity of investment opportunity, and at the same time, perhaps is the greatest economy risk in this century. Carbon market is a key and essential part of the accelerating climate action. Credit integrity defines the long-term market value. Quantitative and technology-driven skills like artificial intelligence are critical for shaping the future of carbon markets. And this is a very nice place for working because you are contributing to professional growth and planetary well-being.